Crime Cafe, your podcasting source of great crime, suspense, and thriller writing. I'm your host, Debbi Mack. Before I bring on my guest, I'll just remind you that the Crime Cafe has 2 ebooks for sale, the 9-book box set and the short story anthology. You can find the buy links for both on my website, debbimack.com, under the Crime Cafe link. You can also get a free copy of either book if you become a Patreon supporter. You'll get that and much more if you support the podcast on Patreon, along with our eternal gratitude for doing so. But first, let me put in a good word for Blueberry Podcasting. I'm a Blueberry affiliate, but that's not the only reason I'm telling you this. I've been using Blueberry Podcasting as my hosting service for my podcast for years, and it's one of the best decisions I ever made. They give great customer service. You're in complete control of your own podcast. You can run it from your own website, and it just takes a lot of the work out of podcasting for me. I find for that reason that it's a company that I can get behind 100% and say, you should try this. Try Blueberry. It doesn't require a long-term contract, and it's just a great company, period. And it also has free technical support by email, video, and phone. So you can get a human being there. Isn't that nice? Hi, everyone. My guest today is the USA Today best-selling indie author of the John Tyler thrillers and the C.T. Ferguson crime fiction series. Born in Baltimore, he now lives in the Maryland suburbs of D.C., a place that I know well, or at least I used to know it well. It's my pleasure to have with me Tom Fowler. Hey, Tom, how are you doing today?
Good, Debbie. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent, my pleasure. I was particularly intrigued by the fact that you are writing hard-boiled mysteries that take place in Baltimore. You're originally from Baltimore, and you've also written a whole lot of those books. How many books do you have in the C.T. Ferguson series?
16 currently. Just put up the pre-order for number 17, which will be out. My hope is to have it out a little before Christmas.
Well, I got to tell you, I love a hard-boiled mystery, and I love the idea of the setting in Baltimore. How many books do you plan to write for the series? What's your plan for the series in general?
Yeah, I don't have any plan to end it. I think it's common in the genre to have these kind of open-ended series. Look at the Spencer series. Robert B. Parker wrote 40 or 41 before he died, and there's been another 11 or 12, I think, since his passing. Ace Atkins wrote the first 9 or 10, and now Mike Lupica has taken over. So, Jack Reacher is more of a thriller character, I would say, than mystery, but that's at 27 or 28. And again, there's an author transition happening there too. So I think it's very common to see these series just keep going, and as long as people are interested in reading them, I'm certainly interested in writing them. I have a lot of fun with these books.
That's cool. I've noticed they tend to be on the short side. Is that intentional? Is it just the way you write?
I guess it's just the way I write. They're usually 70 to 75,000 words. The more recent ones have been closer to 70. So I'd say most mysteries are probably somewhere in the 75 to 80 range. So I hope I'm not writing too short, but it's the right length for the story. I don't want to pad the word count unnecessarily. They're first person stories, so there's not a lot of side quests, if you will, happening that other characters are going on. So
Exactly, yeah.
yeah.
And personally, I like short reads.
Mhm.
So, that just really appeals to me.
Yeah.
Um, what prompted you to write that series?
A few things. I've mentioned before, I think I have a longer bio that mentions I wrote a murder mystery in air quotes for those who can't see me when I was about 7 years old, in which no one actually died. So no murder. And I named well, I guess I can't really call him the killer, but the person who stabbed people, the stabber, like in the first paragraph. So not a mystery either. 0 for 2. but it's because I was at my grandparents' house a lot, and they would watch shows like The Rockford Files. This was probably the early '80s, and they were in they were probably in syndication by then. But Columbo, shows like that where you had a cop or a PI, someone solving a mystery. And I've read a lot of different genres over the years. But I wanted to, at some point in the late 2000s to 2010, I wanted to write my own. And I really started writing that book. I know I had a finished draft of the first book, The Reluctant Detective, around November, December of 2010. I wouldn't publish it until October of 2017. So the process took me about 7 years, but I wanted to do, I like the crime genre a lot. I was big into shows like Monk and Psych and things like that at the time, but I didn't want to do like the photographic memory. I felt like that was overdone. So I had to put my own spin on it a little bit, but I really wanted to write something in that space because
Hmm.
I've been a fan of it, even going back to my childhood, watching those shows at my grandparents' house.
Absolutely, yeah. And those shows are great too.
Hmm.
I loved the Rockford Files. Oh my gosh. He was just perfect.
Yeah.
Um, I also noticed that you have a protagonist in John Tyler thrillers who's a military veteran. What inspired you to write that character?
Well, I've never been in the military myself, but I've
Hmm.
worked for the Army and the DoD as a civilian for, not in that space anymore, but I was there for about 16 years or so. So I met a lot of people who were in the military. And I wanted to do a different series, and I wanted to do like more of a thriller style, like a military action thriller. And obviously the 800-pound gorilla in that space is Jack Reacher. So, to be clear, I very much enjoy the Jack Reacher books. I'm not trying to bag on Jack Reacher. But I wanted to do something a little bit different than Jack
Hmm.
Reacher. So I still wanted someone who's been in the service and, seen and done his share. But a different character in a lot of ways, I think. Um, and in the series, Tyler has PTSD and lives with it and manages it. Um, he has a teenage daughter who lives with him as the series opens. She later goes to college. So there are a lot of differences, I think, between, a character like Reacher or the more loner types that you normally see in the genre. But I wanted to ground him a little bit differently and tell stories, a character like Reacher, he rolls into a town, raises hell, shoots people, and leaves. And
Hmm.
he's pretty much the same guy in the next book. And that's fun. But I wanted someone who has been affected by what he's done and continues to be affected by the things he does.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. I write about a female Marine veteran
Hmm.
who also has PTSD and an opioid addiction,
Oh, wow.
who is trying to function as a private eye essentially.
Hmm.
So that's an interesting thing to deal
Yeah,
with.
I read about something for people with traumatic brain injuries. It was like a therapeutic painting program.
Hmm.
And I talked to someone I know who's a psychologist, and I said, could something like this be adapted for people who were trying to manage PTSD? And she said yes. So in the books, Tyler has this painting program that he does. He has watercolors and he has an easel, and he like just gets these things out of his head. And interestingly, one of my readers, one of as teaches art and teaches watercolors. So he actually gave me some advice about like, these are the kinds of things he should buy, and this is how, someone who's not an artist, because Tyler certainly wouldn't be an artist. This is how someone who, an amateur, would do a painting, and this is, they would do this part first and then this. So
Mm.
I think my descriptions of him sitting at the easel and doing his painting has gotten a little more accurate over time, just because someone who reads my books happens to have that experience and said, "Hey, you can have him do it this way."
Hmm. Wow, that's really interesting.
Hmm.
I like the idea of the art therapy as something to use to manage traumatic brain injury.
Hmm.
Fascinating. Um, so how largely does Baltimore as a setting figure in your stories?
Pretty prominently. Most of the stories, I mean, they all take place at least partially there. Some of them are entirely contained in the city, but there's also some stories that go into the county or other parts of the state. A couple of the Tyler books, actually, some of the action takes place in nearby states, but they always usually start and end in Baltimore. You know, it's my city. It's the city I know. it's the city I love. I know it doesn't always have the best reputation, but it's more than just The Wire, and it's more than just what you see on the news.
Exactly. Yeah.
It really is. It's a great city, and I want it to feature in there. And yeah, I'm writing crime stories, so yes, people are dying in Baltimore in these stories, but people die in every city every day around the world. Um, but I really want it to feature in there, and I get emails from people, not just people who lived in Baltimore, but like someone who says, "Oh, I came to Baltimore for a conference 10 years ago, and we ate at the restaurant you wrote about in your book," and just little things like that. So when you ground your series in any real city, even Baltimore in this case, you're going to have people who know the landmarks, who have driven on those streets and who have been in those
Exactly.
neighborhoods, and it creates a real setting for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So, you're an indie author like myself.
Mhm.
What has your experience been like as an indie author? And was it what you expected?
No, it was not. It's
Uh-huh.
a lot more than what I expected, and I love it. Don't get me wrong, but there are days it really feels like a second job. There are days feels like a tied for first job, maybe. Um, it, it I really kind of envisioned it as, okay, I'm going to write these books, I'm going to put them up there, and yeah, I wasn't expecting to get rich or anything, and I haven't gotten rich from writing books. Um, but man, there's a lot that goes on,
Yes.
you have to get your books in front of people. So you have to have an email list, and oh, and now you need to be on social media, and here's these Amazon ads and Facebook ads and things like that. That it's like, man, I want to write. I don't want to do all this stuff, you know? And I think a lot of people are in that boat because we get into this, I think, because we're creatives and we want to write and we have stories. And then the businessy aspects of it is where we kind of throw up our hands a little bit. And I've certainly done done that in some areas. But yeah, I try to carve out time, before the workday, after the workday, on the weekends, at lunch. I don't do my writing work I have a day job. I don't write during my day job. That's my day job hours. But before and after, on the weekends, things like that, that's when I carve out my time. But yeah, it's great. I love it. I wouldn't trade it, but it is more than I thought I was signing up for. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the technology has made it so,
Yeah.
as well as the proliferation of social media.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure that social media is nearly as important as a lot of people think it is.
Right. No, I think if you have to pick social media or like doing an email list, I 100% always pick email.
Absolutely. And I think you have to be careful about which social media you decide to use too, because
Yes.
some just seem to lend themselves to people better than others. I hear it all the time. Use something that you're comfortable with,
Hmm.
as opposed to trying to wrap your mind around every single one out there.
Right. The advice I used to hear, I know Mark Dawson mentioned this at some point, but I don't know if he's the originator of the advice, but it was always for social media platforms, pick two, and one of them should be Facebook, simply because you can run Facebook ads. That's
Yeah,
probably still true, but you should also go where your audience is. Not everybody's audience is on Facebook.
absolutely. I agree totally. Um, so what kind of marketing do you do and how much of it?
As little as possible.
As little as possible. I know the feeling.
Yeah, I do have two Facebook ads that run, one to The Mechanic, which is the first Tyler book, and one to a box set on my direct store, my Shopify store. But there's another aspect of indie authoring that I didn't think I would have to
Hmm.
get involved in, selling my books directly. Um, I have like an Amazon ad. It's a defensive ad, I guess, targeting me um, and my books. And that's really, in terms of advertising, that's all I do. And that doesn't work out to be a great amount of money every month. I have a newsletter that I send every 2 weeks. I do things like BookBub, Free Booksy, those kind of newsletter promos periodically. I am on social media, but I don't talk about my books a ton because I feel like all those buy my book posts are just, most of them are very tacky, and I don't want
Yeah, yeah, they
to
are.
do that. I want to engage with people, not just hit them over the head with a book. I don't think that's the point of it. So that's really what I do. I think, most, unless you're doing a ton of marketing, you can probably do most of this in like an hour or two a week.
I think you're right, frankly.
Maybe a little more on the weeks I write a newsletter, because that always takes a little bit of time. But for the most part, yeah, I think a lot of it can be an hour or two a week. And if I were starting over, I think I would only send my newsletter once a month instead of every 2 weeks. But now I'm locked into that cadence, and I've told people this is how often I'm going to send. So that's what I do. But if I were
Well,
starting over, it would probably be once a month.
yeah, I was going to say you're allowed to change your mind as
Yeah,
long as you
sure.
tell your readers.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see. Do you do book signings, just out of curiosity?
I haven't yet. I was going to start doing them, and then COVID happened, and like people weren't going to bookstores and all that. That's something I'd like to start doing. I did one like in 2019. I did a talk at a library in oh God, Charles County, I think. Um, and sold some books and did a signing afterwards. It's something I'd like to get more into. There's a lot of bookstores near me. There's a few Barnes and Nobles. There's some independent bookstores that are you know in the area or within, say, like an hour's drive, because Columbia, Baltimore, DC, all those places are within an hour's drive from me.
Yeah, yeah,
So there's a lot of possibilities there. So that's something I'd like to start doing, but I haven't done a lot of yet.
yeah. I've done a couple since the
Hmm.
pandemic, or actually, I've done one since the pandemic, and I did one right before the pandemic. And it's like, I feel like I should do more. I feel like I should be out there more,
Yeah.
just meeting people.
Hmm.
Um, have you ever considered crowdfunding your books?
I have, and I've done two Kickstarters so far. For me, they're more. I don't know that I would do like I wouldn't do one all the time for every release. I think that's too much. I think they're more for like more special projects. But it's certainly a viable way to release a book. The one caveat I would offer, the first one I ran, I tried to do it specifically for an audiobook, and there's a large segment of people out there who just do not care about audiobooks. It is a growing market, but more people read either ebooks or physical books than read audiobooks.
Hmm.
So if you're going to do a Kickstarter and you're trying to fund an audiobook, that's fine. Just don't say this is for my audiobook, because you're immediately going to turn off 80% of the people who might be interested in it. Offer audiobook as a reward, certainly, but also make sure you have ebook, print, other stuff in there. Yeah, there's a few books out there on how to set up a Kickstarter. I think Monica Leonel and Russell New have the best one I've seen so far. I think it's called Get Your Book Selling on Kickstarter. Has some really good advice in there. That's what I've used. So my first campaign was audiobook centric and did not fund. My second one did. I have not yet run a third. I haven't found the right project yet. I don't want to do it just like, oh, here's thriller number 8. Let's do a Kickstarter. It doesn't seem special enough to me. Like it's just a normal release. But if I had
Hmm.
something different or something special I was putting out, I would absolutely do it again.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a bad thing to do.
Hmm.
If nothing else, you can get people on board with with what it is you're writing, the kind of thing you write. It's like you attract the right people to yourself by doing that, I think.
Yes. Hmm.
And have you, just out of curiosity, thought of using either Substack or Patreon?
I've thought about it. It's a function of time more than anything. Like, do I think I could reach people on those platforms? Yeah, they're not really discovery platforms though. So I think you kind of have to bring an audience with you or send people to those places.
Hmm.
And for what I would be providing there, is the time outlay worth it? I don't know. There are people who absolutely do well on Substack, Patreon, other subscription-based platforms. It's a second job for me. I don't need it to be a first. I don't want it to be my first job. So it's a lot of that is a function of I don't know if I have the time to do this or to do it really the way I would want to do it.
Yeah, yeah. So what is your profession? Your
Uh,
day
yeah, I,
job.
I work in IT for the federal government,
Ah, which agency?
FDA.
Ah, Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm a former Fed myself.
Oh yeah.
Used to work with the EPA for a while.
Oh nice.
Yeah, it was a living, I suppose.
Mhm.
This is more than I can say for my writing career at this point. Um,
Yeah.
what advice would you give to anyone who is interested in a writing career?
Oh boy, there's probably a lot of things I could say there. I think the biggest one would be to know why you want to do it or what you want to get out of it. Because you might want to, maybe you're a hobbyist who just wants to put up the book you've had in your head for 20 years or your poetry collection or whatever. Or, your grandmother's life story is particularly inspiring and you want to write about that and, get it in the hands of like family and friends and you don't really care if anybody else reads it. Or maybe you want to do this full time. Those are very different goals. They're all very fine goals in and of themselves, but they're very different. And the amount of time and other resources you may have to commit to them is going to vary wildly. So know why you want to do it and have those expectations set accordingly.
That is very, very good advice.
Thank you.
Knowing your why. Why are
Right.
you doing this?
Yes.
Because a lot of people don't care if they make a bestseller list
Hmm.
or even make a living off their writing.
Right.
They want to get published.
Hmm.
They want to express themselves, whatever.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we lose that joy,
Hmm.
of getting what you want to say out there, in service to something else. We're so worried about making money from it that we can't think about the joy of doing it as
Right.
much.
Yeah.
So what I really like to focus on is the joy of doing it.
Yes. Yeah.
It's very
If you don't
important
enjoy it,
because,
then you're doing it
yeah,
wrong if you're not enjoying this.
yeah, I mean, there's so much involved. There's so much work involved. Why would you do it unless you enjoyed it?
Right.
So, yeah.
The only other
Um,
piece of advice I would definitely have, and this is more of a avoiding scams thing, is money
oh
should always
yeah.
flow to the author.
Hmm.
If you are traditionally published, that will come in the form of either an advance or some royalties that your publisher sends you. If you are self-published, you are collecting the money from Amazon, Kobo, whoever. Do not pay anyone to publish your book.
That is, thank you for saying that
Yes.
because too often I hear about people paying to get published. Too
Right.
often. It amazes me because you are the owner of this intellectual
Hmm.
property and you are licensing it to a publisher
Right.
or to whoever, whether Amazon or whatever platform
Hmm.
you're putting it up on. It's a license for them to distribute it.
Right.
So don't pay to get published, period.
Right.
Do
Absolutely.
not. Well, thank you so much for being here and telling us about your books and about your writing. And the fact that you're doing this while working is to me amazing. So many books, too. So you must write really fast.
Yeah, like the first one took me over 7 years to go from starting it to getting it published. We have made a few process improvements, I guess you could say, in the time since. But now I can pretty much turn around a first draft in 6 or 7 weeks-ish.
Wow.
And I send to my editor in chunks, and he sends them back to me. So at first, I would just send him the whole book when I was done, and it would take him several weeks to get it back to me. But now I just send, 6 chapters, whatever, and in this way he finishes like a week after I do, and things are ready to go much faster.
Wow. That's a nice arrangement.
Hmm.
Well, again, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. And
Absolutely.
stick around afterward. We'll do a bonus episode together.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Sure thing. It was my pleasure. I would like to thank everyone also for listening. And if you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review and check us out on Patreon, where you can get access to bonus episodes as well as chapters from my work that I post there. So next time, my guest will be Pablo Trincia. I believe that's how it's pronounced. He's the author of All the Lies They Did Not Tell, which is quite a story about a big scandal in Italy. Until then, take care and happy reading.